The air in our kitchen still smelled of last night's meatloaf and lemon pledge, a scent I associated with trying too hard. It was a Saturday morning in April, the kind where the light slants through the window over the sink just so, making the dust motes dance and highlighting every single crumb on the counter I'd missed. I was on my third cup of coffee, the buzz in my veins doing little to quiet the low-grade hum of anxiety that had become my background music. My name is Sarah, and this is a true story about the day my entire world, the careful, fragile world I'd built in a two-story colonial in a quiet Ohio suburb, almost ended in the very room where we made pancakes. My husband, David, was away on a weekend fishing trip with his college buddies, a tradition I'd insisted he keep. "We're fine," I'd told him, kissing his stubbled cheek at the door. "Ethan and I will have some quality bonding time." I'd said it with a smile that felt painted on. Ethan, my 16-year-old stepson, was still a mystery to me after 3 years of marriage. Our relationship was a carefully negotiated treaty, full of polite good mornings and thank yous, but always with the ghost of his real mother Claire, hovering between us. She wasn't dead, she was in Phoenix, living what she called her best life, which mostly seemed to involve yoga retreats and a new boyfriend who imported artisanal tequila. Her absence was a different, more complicated kind of presence. Ethan was a quiet kid, tall and lanky like his father, with the same intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. He spent most of his time in his room, the low thrum of video games or indie music seeping from under his door. Our interactions were a masterclass in suburban civility. So, when I'd suggested we try making homemade pizza from scratch for dinner that night, a Pinterest-worthy idea that now felt desperately naive, he'd just shrugged and said, "Sure, Sarah." Not Mom. Never Mom. The trouble began, as it often does, with something absurdly small. I was pulling the ceramic mixing bowl from the top shelf of the cabinet, the one with the little blue stripes. My grandmother's bowl. As I turned, my elbow caught the edge of the cake stand, the beautiful, three-tiered glass cake stand David had given me for our first anniversary. It teetered for a heart-stopping second, then plunged to the quartz countertop with a sound like a gunshot. Shards of glass exploded across the kitchen. They glittered on the floor, in the sink, across the stove burners. I stood frozen, a hand over my mouth, staring at the destruction. That cake stand wasn't just a thing. It was a symbol of my new life, of my marriage, of my attempt to create a beautiful, stable home. And now it was 1,000 jagged pieces. What was that? Ethan's voice came from the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, his headphones slung around his neck. He took in the scene, me, statue still, and the galaxy of glass glittering everywhere. I broke the cake stand, I whispered, my voice thick with a stupid, disproportionate grief. He didn't say anything. He just walked over to the pantry, pulled out the dustpan and brush, and got down on his knees. I snapped out of my trance. "Ethan, don't. You're in socks. You'll cut yourself. Let me get the vacuum." "It's fine," he mumbled, already carefully sweeping a pile of the larger fragments. "Just get the trash can." I hurried over, holding the stainless steel bin. As I did, my socked foot came down on a sliver I hadn't seen. I felt a sharp sting and a warm wetness. Ow. Darn it. I hopped back, leaning against the fridge. A crimson bloom was already spreading on the white cotton of my sock. Ethan looked up. For the first time, the polite mask slipped. He looked genuinely concerned. "You're bleeding." "It's just a cut. I'm so clumsy. I'm sorry about the mess." "Forget the mess," he said, standing up. "Sit down. Let me look at it." The authority in his voice was so unlike him, so unlike our usual dynamic, that I complied without argument. I hobbled to a kitchen chair and sat. He disappeared for a moment and returned with the green first aid kit from the hall bathroom, the one with the cartoon dinosaurs on it that we'd never bothered to replace. He pulled the footstool over, sat in front of me, and gently took my foot in his hands. I flinched, more from surprise than pain. "Sorry," he said softly. He peeled back the bloody sock. The cut was on the ball of my foot, deep and clean. "This might need a stitch." "It's fine. Just bandage it up." "It's my own fault." He didn't argue. He set to work with a focus that surprised me. He cleaned the cut with an antiseptic wipe, his touch surprisingly deft. He applied pressure with a gauze pad, then taped it securely. His hands were large, like his father's, but younger, without the nicks and calluses. "You're good at that," I said, breaking the intense silence. "First aid merit badge," he said, not looking up as he gathered the used wrappers. "Boy Scouts. Before we moved here. Before I came along," is what he didn't say. The ghost of Claire hovered again. She'd been the one to take him to Scouts, to help him with the badges. I was just the woman who lived in his dad's house and tried too hard. He finished and looked at the wreckage of the kitchen. Stay there. I'll clean this up. Seriously. He fetched the vacuum cleaner, plugged it in, and began the meticulous process of clearing the floor. He moved chairs, swept under the table, and even carefully vacuumed the rug. He was thorough, methodical. I watched him, this boy who was suddenly a stranger showing competence and care I hadn't known he possessed. A lump formed in my throat that had nothing to do with the broken glass. When the floor was declared safe, he looked at the counter, still littered with tiny fragments. We need damp paper towels for these. They'll stick. Under the sink, I said, my voice small. He nodded, wet a bunch of towels, and began wiping down every surface, checking for glints of light. He did it all without being asked, without a single sigh of resentment. The silence stretched, but it had changed. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence of two strangers sharing a space. It was a quiet, focused collaboration. Finally, he tied up the trash bag, heavy with the remains of my cake stand, and put a new liner in the can. He washed his hands at the sink, the water drumming a lonely rhythm. Thank you, Ethan, I said, and the words felt utterly inadequate. You really saved me. He shrugged, drying his hands on a dish towel. It was an accident. He paused, leaning against the counter, looking at me, really looking at me. You know, you don't have to try so hard. The statement landed like a stone in the quiet pond of the kitchen. What do you mean? All of this. He gestured vaguely around the pristine, now safe kitchen, the perfect homemade pizza plan, the spotless house, the cake stand. You're always walking on eggshells, like you're waiting for someone to tell you you're doing it wrong. I felt exposed, naked, my eyes pricked with tears. I want this to feel like a home. For you, for your dad. It does feel like a home, he said, and his voice was quiet but firm. It did before you started stressing about making it perfect. Dad's happier than he's been in years. I see it. You make good coffee. You remember I hate mushrooms. You tried to help me with my history paper even though you clearly know nothing about the War of 1812. A wet laugh escaped me. I was way off on the dates. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Yeah, but you tried. He looked down at his feet. My mum, she never tried. Not like this. She was always about her own stuff. Her journey. He said the word with a subtle, teenage scorn. She broke a lot of stuff, too. But she'd just leave it on the floor and go meditate or something. You care if it's broken. You care if it gets fixed. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over. They were silent, streaming down my face. He'd never spoken this many words to me at once, and certainly not words that cut so close to the bone of my fears. He looked alarmed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. No, I choked out, wiping my cheeks. No, it's okay. It's just, I thought you hated me. Or, not hated, but resented me for being here, for not being her. He shook his head slowly. I resented the idea of you at first, when Dad started dating, but then you were just, you. You didn't try to be my mum. You didn't try to be my buddy. You were just Sarah, who made weird quinoa salads and got too into the trivia night at the pub. He shrugged again, that teenage full-body gesture that could mean anything. It's enough. It's enough. The two words were a bum, an absolution. The cake stand, I said, sniffing. It felt like I broke the hole. It was a thing, he interrupted, gently. Dad will get you a new one, a better one, and if he doesn't, I will. We sat in that new, soft silence for a minute. The dust motes still danced in the sunbeam, but they looked beautiful now, not like evidence of my failure. So, he said, pushing off from the counter. The pizza dough. The recipe's probably still on your phone. I'll make it. You sit there and supervise. Doctor's orders. I laughed. A real, clear sound. You know how to make pizza dough? YouTube, he said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He found my phone, pulled up the recipe, and began pulling flour and yeast from the pantry. I watched him, this young man measuring and mixing, his brow furrowed in concentration. As he kneaded the dough, his hands strong and sure, he started talking. Not about anything monumental. He told me about a new game he was playing, about a kid at school who had a pet snake, about how he thought his English teacher graded too hard. It was normal, mundane stuff, the currency of real family life. I listened, interjecting with a question or a comment, and it flowed. It finally, blessedly, flowed. The dough rose under a clean dish towel. We debated sauce versus no sauce, settled on a white garlic base. We found pepperoni and leftover grilled chicken and a block of mozzarella we shredded ourselves, the strands sticking to our fingers. We didn't have a pizza stone, so we used a baking sheet. It was imperfect. When David called that evening, his voice crackly from a poor cell signal at the lake. I put him on speakerphone. "How's the bachelor pad?" he asked, laughing. Ethan and I looked at each other, a conspiratorial glance over the flour-dusted island. The pizza was in the oven, filling the kitchen with a smell 1,000 times better than meatloaf and lemon pledge. "We had a bit of an incident," I said, my eyes on Ethan. "Everything okay?" David's voice was instantly worried. "Broke the cake stand," Ethan said, matter-of-factly. "Sarah cut her foot. I played doctor. Then we made pizza. It's kinda lopsided." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could imagine David's face, trying to parse this information, to understand the easy tone between us. "Oh," he said finally. "Well, as long as you're both okay. I'm sorry about the cake stand, honey." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it with my whole heart. We handled it. Later, as the three of us, Ethan, David, and I, ate the lopsided, delicious pizza the next night, David kept looking between us, a faint, puzzled smile on his face. "Something's different," he said finally. Ethan just took another slice. "It's the sauce. We used fresh garlic." But I knew the difference wasn't the garlic. It was the shattering of something far more fragile than glass, and the unexpected.